In another session, we talked about habits and how over time they make up who we are. They leave an impression on our person, whether it's on the outside or the inside. Actually, I want to share another habit that over time can make a difference. Our teeth. See, our teeth, we can lose them at different times of our life. When I was younger, I didn't know how to look after my teeth properly, and I got lots of fillings as a teenager. And by the time I got to the end of my 20s, I think right at my 30, when I turned 30, around about, I got a root canal. Thankfully, they were able to keep their teeth, and I've got all my teeth to this day now that I'm just about 53. But what really changed my life in my early 30s was when the dentist said to me, you know what? If you just do a few key things, change a few key things, add a few key things, they will change your life, and you perhaps will keep your teeth for the rest of your life. And I said, well, what's that then? They said, well, flossing. Do you floss? I said, no. And they said, well, flossing, and they demonstrated how if you do this every day, I think they said it twice a day, but if you do this every day, then it's going to make a really big difference. So I started flossing, and at the beginning of that time, oh my gosh, it's like I'm used to just brushing my teeth, having some mouthwash, and that's it. And it used to take me, it felt like forever, And but over time, I've got it down to like a minute or two, because you get used to things and find out the best ways how to do it. And you know what? After a few short years in my 30s, I got to about my mid 30s, and when I went to dentist, they said, you know what? You've done really well for looking after your teeth. I also go for yearly checkup. That's another thing that helped to change my life. So for my teeth. And so doing yearly checkup plus flossing, they said, you know what? Your teeth are doing really well, and it looks like you're going to keep them all your life. That was a different dentist, So habits over time, if I'd continued doing what I was doing before, just brushing my teeth and mouthwash, I perhaps, may have lost a teeth or two by now. And by the end of my life, who knows how many I would have lost. So changing the habit by listening to someone else helped me to change my life. Thought I'd share that. So let's talk about DNA and how that can also play a part in our how our life pans out. I love what one DNA company said. I got my DNA tested, and they said, you know what DNA is like? I was thinking to myself, what is it like? Well, DNA is like the gun in your life. And I said, okay. Well, it's like you may have predispositions different to something. Maybe you're intolerant to certain things. Maybe you're allergic, or maybe you're predisposed to, for example, diabetes or something else because it's inside your family. So your DNA is full of positives and also weaknesses or negatives. And so when the negatives or the weaknesses are there, they're like a loaded gun. And so, but what can happen over a lifetime is that whether those weaknesses or negatives take effect, it depends on how we live our life. And if we live our life poorly in relation to the weaknesses inside our life, then guess what happens? That gun the trigger can go off in that area of our life. And I want to give you a real life example from me, is that in my family, my Samoan side, is that there is a predisposition to diabetes. See, my mother and her relatives came over as a first generation to New Zealand, Aotearoa, and they were used to a different way of living, different way of eating. They were fitter, eating more healthier. Then they came over to a Western society and then lived a more sedentary life, more not moving and plowing the fields or doing the work outside. They were more indoors, and they ate less healthier because there's such availability of all kinds of junk food, right? And so what happened is I saw a lot of our relatives get diabetes, including my mother, and some even die because of that, complications from that. And so I knew that, our family's got a predisposition to diabetes. And when I did my first sort of checks in my early 30s, it did say, your cholesterol is higher than others, and but and they also said my sugar levels were a little bit elevated. And but I just keep living a relatively free life in terms of, I mean, I really love sweets. I'm not a drinker, a smoker, or anything like that, but I have loved my sweets over time. And so, living that sort of a life over time took its toll. Remember, I told you it's if we have a weakness or a negative in our life, and for me it was diabetes, and if we don't look after ourselves, some people might not affect, they can just have as much junk food as possible. But for me, I couldn't do that. So over time, my body said, you know what? We're gonna pull that trigger on that. And sorry, you've got diabetes. And so yeah, I've got diabetes, which I have to manage. I'm a very, very fit person, and people go, whoa, you got diabetes. But see, it's not related to me being overeating. It's related to my DNA. And so, if I'd been more careful, I perhaps would not pulled the trigger on that area of my life. Maybe you've got areas in your life too where you can see your family, relatives, and you can recognize, you know what, I'll need to be aware of this. And if I don't, I could pull the trigger on that area of my life. That trigger may go off anyway, but if we can do something about it, we should. So now I manage better. I'm having less sweets, still having sweets. I'm having some medication to manage that, and I'm more aware of that particular kind of habit and how the DNA works with it. So I wanted to share that with you. Yes, DNA can play a part in, for example, losing of hair. Some people will lose their hair not because they haven't looked after themselves. It's just the fact that they have that gene which says hair loss. And other people may put on extra weight, not because they've overeaten, just for the fact that their DNA says, you know what, your metabolism is different, so you may eat the same food as someone else, but you perhaps gain. Other people, they've got a different metabolism, and so they can eat forever, and then they will not gain anything. You know what I mean? So DNA plays its part. Just think about it, especially the weaker areas, so that you can manage better, but also the positive areas, maybe your caffeine tolerance, so you can have as much coffee as possible. Well, that's good, right? Like me, I can have coffee or tea before bed, and I can still go to sleep. And that's something my DNA told me. It says, hey, you're caffeine tolerant. There's a lot of other things the DNA can tell you about. Perhaps you might want to consider taking your DNA test and learn something about yourself, and then manage your life better. I hope you do. And I wish you all the best in that. I will see you in another session.